Hello and welcome back to Kaleidoscope. My name is Dr. Mary Botticelli Christensen and I'm your host. And I'd like to welcome you and wish you the happiest of New Year's. I'm here with my colleague and we're going to be talking about nonprofit fundraising. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Shannon Cardellina, joining Mary today, and Happy New Year. What a great time to start off a discussion about nonprofit fundraising.
Right. Both of us have a long history in working with nonprofits and helping them find the money to do the good works that they do, to find volunteers, to help them write mission statements. So we're doing this segment today on It's All About the Money, because you can't do good works without having the money to pay or to do the good works and get other people to do the events. So to start off, we're going to talk about the simplest process and then go to the more complex. So we're going to start off talking about annual appeals. Do you want to start us off, Shannon?
Sure. I'm just to make sure that we are all on the same page. An annual appeal is usually your request for funds from your existing donors, board members, friends, anybody that would see your organization as worthy of support.
Now that's an important point that she made, from your board members or your members. You can't ask outsiders to give money when you inside the organization doing the work haven't made some contribution. It doesn't have to be in the hundreds of dollars. It can be $10. But to go honestly to someone else and say, could you support us when you haven't done it yourself is ingenuine. And we really need to imprint that on you, that get the money first from your organization members and then go out to the public.
And some nonprofit boards actually have a policy where you need to contribute and there's a set amount. Others, there's sometimes just an unwritten expectation of supporting the organization. You're already giving your time as a board member, but it's really hard for you as a board member to go out into the community and ask other people to support the work that you're doing and the organization whose mission you're working on behalf of if you're not also financially supporting the organization in some capacity.
Now, back when I first started in a nonprofit, before we had web pages and home pages and
social media,
and we had to do everything on paper, which meant an annual appeal could be costly in and of itself. Getting them printed up, getting envelopes, doing the mailing, doing it as a bulk mailing, which has always been a treat. But today, doing an annual appeal can be done online with a minimum of output of money, and it can reach a wider and broader audience. So let's just go through some of the quick steps that we want to talk about in terms of an annual appeal. The first one is timings. Did you want to talk a little bit about why these times are really important?
So I know that this is a big one for Mary. We always talk about the end of the year as being a really important time to think about your annual appeal. So most of us tend to think around November. That's also a time of gratitude where people are thinking about giving as we go into the holiday season. And it's also ahead of the end of tax season and making those year-end gifts so that they get counted towards that year. So sending an appeal in November is really smart. That just means that you have to be planning it and preparing it before you get to November. And before we get into that too much, another great time is usually earlier in the year around March and April.
Right, just as you're starting to think about what your tax bill is going to be that year, you want not to make the same mistake you made last year and make a donation before the April 15th when you will see the news of what happened in the previous year. Those two are very critical because they become a pattern. If you continue to do it at the same time every year, people get to prepare for it and budget for it. And you don't, as I said, have to worry about doing a mailing. We have enough ways in which electronically, and we have those QR designs,
QR codes,
the codes that you can do it automatically. You can have a poster in a window with the code on it. You can do it on all of the Friends of Westboro, Best Buddies of Westboro, all of those places on Facebook, as well as having your own Facebook page. And part of the annual appeal is to get former, not old people, but former people who were donors or involved in your, but also to ask them to ask 2 of their friends if they would join you. That's a critical piece to getting new people in. One of the things about annual appeals is that people often forget the most important part, saying thank you in a timely way. Now, have you had any of that experience of working with an organization that said, oh my goodness, I forgot all about that?
I don't think forgetting about it, but I think getting it done in a timely fashion is key, especially if you have an annual appeal that's hitting in November, and so all of the donations are coming in at the end of the year where your staff and volunteers might be taking time off. It's, I think, really important to set a deadline of, maybe if all of these donations came in this week, making sure a thank you goes out within a week or 2 of that. And so not like waiting to send all of the thank yous until a certain amount of time, but having a schedule of thank you notes being prepared. Another thing is if you are using an electronic format, especially if you're able to collect credit card donations online, that makes it a lot easier because most systems, whether it's something like PayPal or DonorBox, are going to let you have an auto-generated thank you note go out. And so that means as soon as a donor makes a credit card donation online, they get that auto-generated thank you note that you can usually personalize to them immediately. And within that is also the important tax information too, right? But then sending a personal follow-up handwritten note from the organization later is really valuable. One of the old adages in our industry, in the nonprofit community, is that you should thank a donor at least twice before you ever consider asking them for more money. And so that's a really easy 1-2 punch, and then a nice way to think of it is just kind of count that as one thank you, even if you have an electronic and a handwritten, and then make sure you're reaching out to them again as a thank you at another time before you ask them for anything else.
Yes, and the most cost-effective mailing is to use a postcard with the front cover designed with pictures of what your organization has accomplished, whether it's working with children or the elderly or those with food insecurity. You have pictures to show what you've done. Then there's the longer sheet that you would print online, which is called the gratitude report. And again, you'll see data, how many people were served, how much money came in, how you met your goals of what you wanted to accomplish that year. And it doesn't cost the same as sending a letter. And it's signed by someone who is either the president or the treasurer, or if you are lucky enough to have someone that is actually in charge of nonprofit and annual appeals. All right, so those are the 3 important parts of annual appeal. And you can get a return on your efforts very quickly. You can see if money is coming in, but you follow up with a little phone call if you know them personally. Did you get our message? Because the year is going to be over. So,
and I know that we're kind of throwing a lot of information out there, but this is, your annual appeal is usually the biggest, easiest way to get money for an organization, regardless of organization size. And obviously, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach for nonprofit fundraising and giving. So you can tweak your approach depending on the type of organization, whether you're grassroots, whether you have staff. And I just want to throw out a couple other ideas to mix into this before we kind of go on to some of our other topics, knowing that annual appeals are the big ones. With the advent of electronic donations, some of the things that we have long talked about in nonprofit fundraising have become much easier, where you have online giving platforms where you can ask donors to set up recurring gifts so they can donate monthly, but you can set that up with their first donation. So that first time you get them on your website to give, you can ask them if they want to set that up as a monthly donation, quarterly, or a one-time. Another idea that is sometimes a little bit harder to do, but it pays off in dividends if you can make it happen, is lots of donors work for a company that offers matching gifts. And sometimes it's $1 for $1, sometimes it's 50 cents on the dollar, or up to a certain dollar amount. But having that part on your giving page, if it's electronic, or even if it's a paper form that they're filling out that asks, do you have an employer matching contribution program at your job? And that allows that person to fill that in. And even if they're not able to give you all of the information or set it up, then you can follow up if they provide you enough information to try to get that matching gift, which would allow their gift to expand more. And that's a really valuable tool to be able to cash in on if your organization has the infrastructure to kind of follow up with that.
Definitely. And follow up is annual appeals middle name. You have to follow up, and having somebody who's in charge of just doing that activity during those 2 times of the year.
So moving on to our next section.
Yes, bequests. This is something that I became very involved in the 40-something years of running nonprofits, was that you have members who are committed to the cause. I was on the board of a shelter for homeless children in Connecticut, and the people who were on that board were so dedicated to those children, they'd do just about anything to raise money. Mm-hmm. And they all, in our meetings and our discussions as head of the board member in charge of finding money, we came up with taking out small life insurance policies for $1,000, which cost, maybe at those days it was like $10 or $15 a month, and making the Bridge Family Services the organization that would be the beneficiary. Another way is to add it to your will, the name of the organization that you feel strongly about and would like to leave some of your current estate to them. In all those 2 cases, you should consult with a financial advisor so that you take all of the necessary steps to protect you and your family. But it's a good way to give a legacy to those people. And all the people who do that, you have a plaque mm-hmm. with their names on it. And so people always like to be recognized. And so you give them a place to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mm-hmm. The same is true with an annual appeal. You can have a placard with all their names and the level of giving. But this is special. This is a legacy.
And that can be done while the person has made the decision to include your organization as a beneficiary or in their will. Mm-hmm. You don't have to wait to receive the gift to honor it.
Yes.
Because if they've designated your organization, then that's a great time to honor them
yes.
right then. And another way that you can have like a different way of these sort of honors for people is that your organization can be set up to receive gifts in honor of a milestone, like a birthday or a celebration. So like if you're having a big 50th birthday party, I think that was the example that we
yeah.
used, you can ask guests to make gifts in honor of the birthday person to your organization, and then you can have a way of celebrating them in that way. Social media is a great outlet
yes.
for sharing and celebrating those types of gifts. And then you can also have a memorial fund, a way to memorialize a friend or family member. If they have passed, you can collect gifts in honor of mm-hmm. them.
In fact, for the last 10 years, my adult children still like to have their adorable little hand-knitted Christmas stockings up when we all get together at different houses, but instead of filling them with gifts, we ask each other what nonprofit we would like to support. So the money they would have spent on little fun things to go in your stocking is a donation to something you're in favor of and passionate about. My husband, when he turned 75, a few years back, everyone was asked not to bring gifts, but to make a donation to the Lions Club and or to the pantry, because those are 2 things that he was committed to. So it's a wonderful way to honor them during the time that they're celebrating, but also keeping in mind that you are making all those people who have given as birthday gifts a part of your list of future donors. So keep that in mind. Yeah. And ask your friends if, would you like to start that with us in your nonprofit?
And you see how this all ties back to the annual appeal, because
yes.
having that list of people to send your annual appeal to becomes paramount right?
Yes.
And so all of these other projects will start to build that list, and you'll have more people that you'll be able to
Yes.
send your appeal to. So our next topic is a big one, and I think it is what most people assume is the key fundraiser for most nonprofits, but that's not always the case, and it's the events and galas.
Yes. They're very time consuming. I don't know how many you have done, but let me tell you. For all different groups, sizes, where it's $150 a ticket to $25 for a buffet. You know, it depends on what your budget is. Usually, when I was involved in it in the Connecticut, we used the local TV station weatherman, who had a personality like you would not believe, and everybody loved him. And so he was the one that would be at every gala, being the introducer of, you know, what was happening, what the guests were, who we were honoring that day. Because part of it is to have someone you're honoring. And people always want to get in the spotlight to be the one honored. So there's a lot of different ways to run a gala. And we both have had different experiences with the big ones. And the one I particularly liked was the No Gala Gala. You promise them they don't have to get dressed up, they don't have to get a babysitter, they don't have to get their hair done. You just send the $100, stay home with your feet up, and we'll recognize you. So that was very popular one year, and I see it would have been popular during COVID. So keep that in the back of your mind. The No Gala Gala.
So when we're talking about the gala, those are usually the more formal events that are highly structured. They're usually more society-driven when we talk about having honorees, an MC, a guest speaker. The more formal affairs where you have to consider a venue rental, food and drink catering, and even entertainment beyond having a guest speaker, sometimes like a DJ or a band, or sometimes even a performance. So what happens with an event like that is that there's a lot of money that has to be spent first in order to make money, which is also an adage in our industry. You have to spend money to make money. And that is never more true than at a gala, when there's a lot of expenses up front that you have to plan for. And so budgeting is a really important element of planning these events as well. But the other type of event is the less formal, and that's the type of events that you see more with civic organizations, schools, the library, different like 5K or 10K type runs that you'll see around town, where those are less formal, but they have different types of structure, where a race is going to be really structured and have to have a lot of strict planning and organization. But our schools around town have all different types of fundraising events all the time, and while that does require a lot of pre-planning and organization, they are usually volunteer-driven events as opposed to staff or a big committee, right? And so, you know, they're more casual to attend. Sometimes there's ticket sales, but sometimes it's more like cash at the event or tickets, concession stands. So those are usually the easier events to pull off right away, where there might be some expenses ahead of time, but not large expenses like the venue rental and the catering and that sort of thing. So, you know, events can be fantastic fundraisers. It just depends on what type of organization you have, and who your existing supporters are, and what audience you're really targeting with your event. If it's a school and you're targeting all of the families of the students at your school, that's different than planning a gala where there's $10,000 tables and you need to fill all of those seats.
And have a lot of staff and volunteers helping out.
Exactly.
The other part of doing the entrepreneurial side, you know, we can have a gala, which you're trying to gain the big dollars, but we also can have an event or a program that will allow us to do what the Girl Scouts have done so successfully nationwide, and here at the Civic Club and the Rotary Clubs and a few have events like the sale of trees, or the Boy Scouts have the wreaths, a one-time event where something is sold and people purchase. For for the organization. There are rules in the federal government about what can be tax exempt. You'd have to subtract how much a tree actually costs from what you would want to give to the organization as an entire gift, but you're receiving something, a product in return, and you can't take tax exemption on that. But the Girl Scouts have gone nationwide with this, and they are the model to follow. To find something, and please don't make it a tote bag. I think all of us have enough tote bags I have a closet, literally a closet full. And they come in handy because they're all color-coded for where I'm going that day. But you need to have something unique. The Duck Derby is a way of doing an entrepreneurial thing. They sell the ducks that go down the little river, and then the winner is announced. And they collect all the ducks again. And they're not real ducks. No ducks are hurt in this. And then we have the type of work in which someone says, I'd like to put together this huge basket, and we're going to sell tickets for it. Now, one of the projects that I had back in Connecticut with our school, our library was switching over to technology. This is how long ago that was. And they were not spending enough on books, and they were going to suddenly be put on probation by the state because they weren't purchasing the required number of books. And so we needed to raise more money. So the meetings were pretty well attended. So I had the kids in the shop class build me a box with a plastic viewer in the front and a lock on it. And then I went to the hardware store and I asked politely and sweetly if I could just have 100 keys and only one of them would open the lock. And then I went around and asked the grocery store and what would be the Staples kind of store if I could have a $50 or $100 gift card, and I would make sure that they were advertised in every venue I could possibly think of. So at every meeting, they could purchase for $10 a key. And at the end of the meeting, they would stand in line and try to open the lock. And there was the one key in. They often wondered if there was really a key in this, but there was. And someone right there won a $100 gift card to the grocery store. So that $10 was small compared to the $100 they would get. And it became a real event. People started coming to the meetings because they wanted to be involved in that. So if you can find something unique that no one else has worked on before and use your creativity, you can start something that will lead to not only more money, but also a little bit of fun and more new members. So that was a...
so this type of fundraising strategy is generally referred to as an earned income strategy. And there's lots of different ways to approach it. Sometimes it's as simple as a t-shirt sale. Sometimes it's the candy sales that you see at the schools and that type of thing. But organizations really have an opportunity to be creative in this endeavor. I worked at a museum where they kind of went with the exclusive item to try to raise additional funds. So what happened is if you were a certain level member at that museum, every year the museum would produce a poster of a work of art that was within our collection, and it would be given to members, but the members had to come with their membership card and show it at the museum store to claim their poster of this work of art. But then there would be a limited number of additional posters available for people to purchase. And so that's a great earned income strategy because you only produce a certain amount of them, so you kind of create that exclusivity or desire to have them, or you're upselling people on their membership, which is also a donation, right? And so then you're earning more income that way. So there's two different ways in a strategy like that. So looking at creative ways to raise additional funds through some sort of earned income strategy is a great opportunity for organizations.
And actually, the Westboro TV can be very helpful because they can come and tape your event for them, for you, and then broadcast it so that more people can see it, or you can say, go watch this and see what we were doing. And I think that's really important, or trying to get on in the local paper or on the local channel that you can get something in. Sometimes it backfires, and you don't get it on, and sometimes you're on because it's so unique and wonderful. And they say, yes, let me just take that little clip. And the thing I learned back then in those days, if you can get it before lunch, the noontime show always needed a little human interest. And you got on for sure. And if it picked up interest, you got on the 5 o'clock news. And that was where you thought, okay, I finally made it into the big time. But you would know more about that from your background.
Well,
in,
that also was a long, long time ago.
well, there were still TVs,
The industry changes, though. One of the other areas that we would be remiss if we didn't mention about fundraising is grants. And that is such a huge topic, grant writing and getting grants for your organization, that we feel like that might require its whole entire show at some other date. But the big thing about that is that grant writing is not something that can be just done. You can't just sit down and start doing that. It generally requires trained staff and a lot of research. Those are the two big components that go into that, right? There's a lot of different ways where you can research available grants. I know that it used to be called Foundation Center and it's now Candid, I believe. And that's a great way to start looking at different foundations that make grants. But there are foundation grants, there are corporate foundations. So that would be private foundations, corporate foundations, and then there's even government grants that are available. So that sort of is just barely opening Pandora's box of the grant writing opportunities that are out there and ways to get oftentimes large dollar amounts for your organization. But that is not something that can be just jumped into lightly. It requires a lot of effort and
and skill in writing and skill in persuasion. And the you have to know which person at that organization is the right one to speak to. So if you want a sponsorship for a pickleball tournament, you don't call the development office of a corporation or philanthropy department. You would call the public relations or community involvement person. But if you want a grant of either 5, 10, 20,000, you need to go to the person in charge of philanthropy, because all corporations, according to state laws, is that they have to give 5% to nonprofits. So get in line, because if they have to give it away, you have to be standing there ready to be the most persuasive one. And that means a good mission statement, a good budget, and a good track record of doing good work.
Right. And you need to meet their giving guidelines. So most foundations or corporations that have like a giving arm have specific causes or topics that they prefer to focus their giving on. So yes, that's something that we could spend a lot more time on. But you just touched on something that I think that we inadvertently glossed over quickly when we were talking about events and galas, and that is the sponsorship element. And that the events, whether it's a small informal one or a large-scale gala, that is where we would be looking for sponsorships as well. But one of the last things that we wanted to talk about was a little bit of resources that people can look into for fundraising. And I tend to look at the Board Center. That's a great website with a lot of learning that can be done there if you're looking for some basic information. But Mary and I always have books that we lean into as
books
guides.
Are,
So we just grabbed the ones that we had available. This is the Complete Guide to Fundraising Management. It was a textbook that I used during my master's program for nonprofit management. So it's just one that I lean into heavily, but the library has lots of other books. Which one did you bring?
I brought the Nonprofit Entrepreneur, Creating Ventures to Earn Income. And it's a step-by-step document where you read and then you're supposed to try and earn money through that same method of providing a product that someone actually wants and having them purchase it and do the marketing. The Grantmanship Center also has a really good website. The Foundation Center in New York City has material for you, and both of those places were locations that I went to be trained to be a nonprofit manager and a certified grant writer. So these skills never leave you. You have to adapt to the way things are done, like TV and online products, which makes it so much easier. I even had to do bulk mail in the old days and carry those big, heavy bags to the post office.
Yeah.
Now, a few clicks on your phone, and you can send it out to hundreds and hundreds of people.
So there's tons of resources out there and available. This is just a conversation to sort of get the process started, get you thinking about different ways that you can raise funds for your organization.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We always
Thanks
have
for
such a
having
good
me.
time. Thank you. And make sure you stay safe and warm this January. Thank you again.